Hey everyone, my name is Ron D'Apollonia and welcome to A Proven Path, the road to social selling success. I'm the VP of client training here at Sales for Life, and I've got two outstanding individuals that I would like to turn it over to today to do most of the talking, because they have a tremendous amount of experience, a robust amount of experience actually implementing social selling into their organizations. The first individual that I have is Kevin Casey, the head of sales training and development for Thomson Reuters. And the second person I have here is Tracy Barr, VP of demand generation at Kofax. Hi guys, how are you? Sorry guys, can't hear you.
Hey, Ron.
Hey, perfect. How are you? How are you guys? So let's get right into this. Our first question here is, and maybe we'll start with you, Kevin. Tell us about how and why social selling became a strategic initiative for you at Thomson Reuters, and I'm going to ask the same question for Tracy. So what spurred it? What was the very first thing that happened for you, Kevin, where you thought social was something you wanted to bring to Thomson?
Good question, Ron. The beginning really started with the changing needs and also demands of our customers. We discovered that more and more customers had less and less time. The preference was to do a WebEx presentation. It was to spend more time communicating via the phone versus face-to-face interactions. So the effect of that was less time with the customers, which required us to have a better conversation in a much shorter period of time. I think, as we all know, a presentation that we do in a boardroom or face-to-face with a customer is not and does not translate to how we communicate via social media, or how we communicate via the phone, how we communicate via email. Commonplace today is communicating with email. I would say that in more than half of our customer interactions are email versus maybe where they were 15, 20 years ago, which was phone.
Hey, Ron, would you like me to answer the same question?
A second, because I'm going to ask you the same one, Tracy. What was the very first time you heard about social? You kind of see this going on in the market for you, but what got you to the point where you thought you wanted to look at it? What was it that intrigued you about social selling?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure how common it is for social selling to originate out of a marketing department, but that's exactly what happened at Kofax. We were about 2 years into our digital transformation strategy within marketing, and we had spent a good portion of that time developing a content marketing strategy and implementing on that strategy, creating content that solved problems rather than sold products. And we had maximized our capability of getting that content out through our paid channels and through our organic channels, and realized we were still missing a really critical element, and that's the network that our sales team had and our customers through that network. And so we created an initiative we called Go Social, and Go Social is a combination of things. We initiated a brand advocacy platform so that we could start sharing that content with our sales team right away, and they could then use it to add value in their customer engagement. We also started to do social media one-on-one training, because we knew a good portion of our sales team did not use social in a regular basis on a personal level, so we had a lot to accomplish in terms of just introducing social channels and helping optimize LinkedIn profiles. And at the same time, we realized that in order to be successful, we'd have to do enablement around social selling in a much more rigorous process. So we started to evaluate how we do that, and we came across Sales for Life.
So based on, you just said something that kind of spurred me to the next question here. which is it doesn't sound easy. It doesn't sound like you just make a decision and say, hey, let's do this. And you push a button and it happens. And so when things are not easy, I imagine that a lot of people, or at least some people within an organization, might be resistant to this. So the next question I have, and we'll start with you, Tracy, this time. When implementing your social selling program, where was the biggest resistance that you felt at Kofax, and then how did you get through it?
You know, Ron, honestly, we didn't have a lot of resistance, and as crazy as that sounds, in hindsight, I really wish we did. So there's a general agreement that social selling was important. We all know the stats, and no one questioned the stats, but the way we approached it initially was through a pilot. Our sales leadership team said basically run a pilot, prove that it works, come back to us, and we'll go from there. But what that pilot didn't do is involve our sales leadership in any meaningful way. We went right to the seller. And because of that, the success of the pilot was really dependent on the individual. We had some really passionate people in the pilot who fully adopted social selling, and they made it a best practice, but they did it within their own context of a sales process. We had many others that felt uncomfortable at first. Social media in general was uncomfortable for them, so social selling was really uncomfortable. And when the pressure of quarter close came upon them, they pushed it aside for more tried and true methods of selling, and they never picked it up. The best way we can explain it is it was like we were teaching them a new sport. And for some people, they felt really passionate about tennis or about golf, but for others, picking up that racket or that club was really uncomfortable for them. And so without that sales discipline, that sales leadership, and that map to how you get from what you do on a daily basis to optimizing your pipeline and your revenue stream and your customer engagement long term, it was just a little too much for our sales team to embrace right away. So at that point, we realized we made a big mistake. And I think the biggest lesson we learned was a lack of resistance doesn't equal commitment. And so social selling is a commitment to a cultural change as much as it's a commitment to general training. And that cultural change has to start with our sales leadership. So after the pilot, we had some good success, but not as much as we had hoped to do. But it taught us a lesson, and we started the next session a lot differently.
That's very, very interesting. Very, very interesting that non-resistance didn't mean they were in full force. That I never stopped to think about that. Kevin, what about you? Did you have buy-in right away, and what was the biggest resistance that you felt when you tried to roll this out at Thomson?
Yeah, not too dissimilar from Tracy. I think resistance is a little bit too strong a word. We did have questioning, right? So we have the senior sales leadership who always question what's the ROI in terms of having people step out of their job of selling during core business hours, whether it's in the field or whether it's inside sales. So what's the benefit going to be to my organization? Within Thomson Reuters, we have a very solid sales leadership team who is very supportive. So being able to share ROI based on previous work we've done with Sales for Life went a long way. So first you have the sales leadership, right? What's the benefit to me and my organization? We support development of our people, but how is this going to get us to where we need to be this year? The second end, which is a little bit more interesting, is on the side of the actual learners, right? You can have an individual who has grown up with computers who would say, hey, I wrote my first program when I was 5 years old. I hacked into NASA when I was 10. What is it that I'm going to learn during this program? And then you also have people that have been in the role for 15, 20 years who have had success. And their real question is, well, again, what am I going to learn in terms of how to do my job better? So there's not, again, as much resistance as it is maybe not a clear understanding. And that's one of the challenges we're working through, which is changing the perception of what social selling is. I think too often people view it as something for inside sales. It's something for new hires learning the business. But in reality, it is a core competency that is becoming more and more relevant in terms of the way we sell, whether it is an inside sales role by assignment or whether it's a field-based role that just by the nature of how the customer prefers to communicate, more and more importance is placed around being able to communicate effectively via multiple channels.
Okay, so that was actually not the answers I thought you guys would give. It was very, very interesting to have insight into the two massive companies that you guys are leading these initiatives in. So let me ask you something. What about the role of a senior executive? So I think that's the next question. What about the role of senior execs? How important is it to get buy-in from them? And how did you actually go about doing that? And maybe we'll start with you again, Kevin.
Thanks, Ron. So of course, senior buy-in, it's critical. Depends on how high you're saying within the organization. Typically, we market the inside sales program that we administer through Sales for Life at our VP level, sometimes the director level. Having them gain a clear understanding of what it entails, what we're asking their team to be going through is important. But again, it's back to the ROI. What can we show the leadership that they're going to get on return based on their team participating? I found in my career, in terms of my role, I sell to the sales team internally, whether it's a program, whether it's a process. So I need to be able to speak the sales team's language, and I found that start talking about ROI, you get some ears perked up.
And what about you, Tracy?
So we spoke about the buy-in from the senior executives, and we certainly had that. What we didn't realize was that what we needed to do is really educate the senior executives in terms of what it meant to their sales team in terms of a sales process. And we found that once we did a training with our senior sales executives, from the EVP through our vice presidents, regional vice presidents, at even director level, we mapped a as-is process to a to-be process, kind of looking at a day in the life of the salesperson, and empowered our sales leadership team to be able to coach and mentor and question on a weekly basis the social selling tactics and techniques that the individual sellers are doing in order to support that transition into this new digital process. And that education moved beyond buy-in to support, encouragement, training, influence, and empowerment that really is helping to make it a success.
Okay, so Kevin, I want to jump back to you because you were talking about ROI and how ROI really was the one metric that senior leaders wanted to hear. Were there any other KPIs that you were using to measure to determine the success of the program on other levels? So clearly ROI, everyone wants to know that. What else were you using to see if you were getting any traction from the program and if it was worth continuing with social selling, or do we just go back to what Anthony's asking us here online on the question of do we just keep cold calling, just keep your sales guys cold calling?
Yeah, good question. So obviously the dollar amounts are the most effective, but to get to the dollar amounts, we do need a few other KPIs that we do track. The first is conversion of leads, right? From those roles that have a high percentage of prospecting, how many times have they converted a lead, whether it's through marketing or whether the one they've developed on their own, into an actual opportunity? The second piece was how have we advanced an opportunity through the pipeline? It's a critical skill in order to be able to advance an opportunity, and we can't advance an opportunity unless we have the customer buy-in, as well as the customer taking very specific steps within their own organization to get buy-in. So we're able to look at it from the perspective of converting leads to advancing opportunities, as well as closing, And then there you have it, Ron. Then you have the actual dollar amount of the ROI. And we track that on an individual basis as well as in partnership with the Sales for Life team.
Okay. And Tracy, what KPIs did you use?
Our KPIs are very similar to what Kevin shared. It's about the volume of contacts created, pipeline created, opportunities created. It's about the velocity in which those opportunities progress through the sales cycle. Upon our pilot, we did a kind of gamification of what we learned, and we asked individuals who participated in the pilot to submit their best practice or a case study of what they learned from the class. And from there, we chose the top 3 case studies, and we allowed each to create a presentation and present it back to our sales organization, to our sales leader. And there was a nice reward or prize to the top case study that was presented internally. So we had our head of marketing, our head of sales, and also Jamie from your organization as judges. And the 3 candidates presented their cases. From there, we identified a couple other KPIs that we did not originally think about, things about dead zone opportunities being reopened or number of industry online communities that we're participating in. Those are some of the others that the contest really helped us illustrate as equally as important than the hard numbers.
Okay, so I have a question here from Anthony Matos, and I'm going to ask it a little bit different. He's saying, isn't cold calling better than social selling, which really shows, I think, the lack of understanding that's still out in the market, that you're not doing one or the other. You're kind of, and by cold calling, I'm going to assume he just means reaching out by phone, not necessarily that it's, that we don't know anything about the prospect. But I see a lot of this in the market. On LinkedIn, there's a lot of posts, there's a lot of this argument going back and forth, and some of it I think is simply for the sake of just causing controversy. So I don't have this question to ask you, but I'd like to ask you guys, because you're leaders of very, very enormous companies. You've implemented social selling. You're clearly plugged in with KPIs and with a sales team. So I'd like to know from your perspective, you see, a sales team that's just picking up the phone and just, let's call cold calling, just making unexpected calls to people, versus combining that with some social strategies and still using the phone. What have you seen that you can share with the folks on the webinar here that are still kind of caught in between and not sure, if they should just keep powering ahead with the phone, or if they should stop the phone and do social, or if they should do a combination of both? Can you tell us from your experience, and maybe we'll start off with Kevin, from your experience at Thomson Reuters, massive organization, what have you seen, and can you shed some light on this for us?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think the easy answer is there's no wrong way to get a prospect interested in your offerings. So what I will say is that with the advent of caller ID, people are less likely to pick up a number they don't know and they're not familiar with. So I do think that that's a unique challenge. I think that what we've seen, in terms of effective email campaigns that targets a particular role, a particular persona that speaks to their particular business or, again, their particular role, has been more effective than actually picking up the phone. But again, there is no right way, there is no wrong way. The goal is to get the prospect on the phone. And what we've even seen from different formats we've used in the email campaigns, there's no one magic email, right? When we have some of the social selling courses going on, everybody wants that magic bullet. What's that perfect thing to say to this individual? We're all different. We all respond differently to different types of emails, different types of approaches. So I guess to answer that question, Ron, do an experiment on your own. Make 25 phone calls, send out 25 good focused emails, see what happens.
Okay. And Tracy, what about, how would you answer that question? What have you seen at Kofax?
So I'm laughing because we did get that question a lot. And the way we addressed it was I simply printed out the last 30 days of requests that I got on the phone, the calls that I got that I didn't answer, as well as LinkedIn individuals from sales trying to link in with me without context in terms of what they were trying to connect on. And then I printed out one that was a really good one that I responded to. And I think that Kevin is right on, where there's different personas and each will react a little differently. If you're talking to a government audience, it's probably very effective to pick up the phone, and I'm generalizing now. Whereas if you're talking to other executive level who have gatekeepers or people who are in meetings all day, so you're not going to get through to those individuals in traditional fashion. And so social selling is a really important tool in your toolbox. But beyond just trying to target an individual, what social selling really enables you to do is have an influence over a committee that you may or may not normally have influence over. You can reach a broader audience in a less maybe confrontational or less one-on-one way, and those individuals are within the organization are likely to be part of the decision making later on. So it's important that you consider the entire audience, not just your target persona, and social selling allows you to do that.
I was actually going to give my answer, but you guys did a way better job. So here's the question that was the first one that popped to my mind when I found out that I was going to be working with, just asking you guys questions, sort of moderating this discussion. This is it. I thought, look, we've got Kevin from Thomson Reuters, we have Tracy from Kofax. Both, I can't even imagine what it's like to be in your shoes. You started from a program from, hey, what's social selling? Implemented throughout your program, throughout your organization. There's speed bumps, there's scratches and bruises along the way, and now you're able to look back and say, okay, if I were to do this again, how would I do it, and what would I do differently? And I guess the way they phrased it here is, what would be the biggest challenges with social selling? What obstacles, and maybe more importantly, what recommendations do you have for other attendees here that maybe are where you were many, many, many moons ago, thinking about, okay, I have to implement something like this. What am I going to face? What advice would you give them? And let's start with this time with Tracy.
Sure, Ron. So I've talked a little bit about it already, which is, our biggest obstacle was our own lack of recognition that support meant that we needed a commitment. We needed to make sure that our leadership team was enabled more than our sales team and before our sales team. So that would be what became an obstacle for us, but we recovered from that. That's something I would certainly recommend thinking about, and don't shortcut that if you're starting off a social selling initiative yourself. The second second recommendation I would say is actually something that wasn't an obstacle for us because it started in the marketing organization. But if you're part of the marketing organization or you're part of a sales organization that is looking to do social selling for the first time, make sure your marketing organization is ready from a content perspective. Content is our currency in everything we do from a social arena, and had we not been ready for that, it would be hard to catch up, because content is often the tallest pole in the tent. It takes a while to create content. It takes a long while to create great content, and you need that kind of constant feed of third-party as well as branded content. So if you don't have a methodology for that, make sure that you are bringing the marketing partner along with you so that they can get ready to support the initiative from a marketing perspective as well.
Okay. And Kevin? Same question to you.
So, Rod, I think it's one that you're well aware of. It's engagement. So our program with Sales for Life, it's a 7-week program, and it's 1 hour a week. And so I'm absolutely convinced that's the right way to do it. It takes away this type of development / training from a 2-day event or a 1-day event into an actual program where they get the opportunity to not only implement what they've learned over the course of that, but also ask questions. So the format's great, but what it's led to is something that I've entitled the Kenny Loggins effect. So for those of you that are Top Gun fans, you'll recognize the song Danger Zone. So it's a continual reinforcement as well as monitoring of where people are at. They get to the danger zone when they start to get 2, 3, or maybe even 4 modules behind where the rest of the group is at. And so we have to be aware of not only where the people are at in terms of monitoring that, but also engaging their managers to ensure that they're also helping to coach through that. So I think it's actual during the program itself, which is keeping people engaged and keeping them moving through it, because we have seen that those who have successfully completed the program, for those that are interested in social selling, I would ask you to encourage you to reach out to Sales for Life to get some of this data, but there is a marked difference in performance for those who have successfully completed the program to those that maybe started the program and did not complete it. So we know that it works that way, and we just have to continually, I think monitor is the wrong word, but we do have to stay on top of the engagement as well. And for those of you now singing Danger Zone, you're welcome.
So one more question for you, Kevin, and then the same one for you, Tracy. I have a question here from I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, Mayank Jain, and the question revolves around: can you talk a little bit about social in regards to the different types of sales positions? So maybe, does it work differently in inside sales versus, business sales versus sales development rep or telemarketing? Did you find that there was a difference in application at these different positions?
Great question. And I think to a certain extent there is. I think within an traditional inside sales role, they do spend their days via email and via phone. So that's more relevantly important. But one of the things I touched on at the opening was changing the perception of social selling and really what it entails and what it is. I also mentioned something in terms of our reduced face-to-face time with customers. Even internally, our meetings have gone from what we would typically have 5 years ago, an hour, we're lucky if we get a half hour with some of our colleagues. So again, it speaks to the importance of your message. It speaks to the importance of who you're communicating with. So I do think that there is perhaps a gradient scale in terms of maybe usage, but not the importance. Even if you're managing our largest accounts, you're still communicating via the customer, whether it's an end user, whether it's an executive, on a more frequent basis than you have in the past. So I guess the easy answer is on a gradient scale that there's maybe less usage, but by no means less important.
Okay. And Tracy, what about you? Did you find social work differently with different sales positions at your organization?
Slightly. I would echo what Kevin said. I think from an inside sales perspective, the way they leverage that content is maybe slightly different, but they do use it, and maybe they use it earlier in the sales cycle, and they use it as well as a nurture capability, whereas an individual AE or maybe even our technical sales team will use it to reach a new opportunity, to create a new opportunity, to add a new account. So slightly different applications, but content is the basis of all that, and the techniques in terms of the concepts of social selling to add value, to take a consultative approach, that applies to everybody. And
Tracy, I have a question here from Mikey Paul Powell. And he's asking, Tracy, do you think that the responsibility to create content for social selling falls solely upon marketing instead of sales? What do you think?
Absolutely not. I think content falls on everybody's shoulders, but from a marketing perspective, we're certainly empowered to create different kinds of content, maybe higher value assets, and we look to sales to give us input into what's top of mind with our customers. So I would say maybe marketing creates 70%, sales creates 30%, but of the 70% that marketing creates, it's certainly influenced and prioritized by our sales team, who are closest to our customers.
Okay, and Kevin, I'll toss this one to you. Another question from, I think it's Dan. He's saying, I still believe KPIs associated with social selling success are fuzzy. I'm not sure what he means by that, but how are you guys specifically tracking the program's success? How are you and your reps specifically reporting on this week to week, month to month? So Kevin, maybe you can start us off.
Yeah, so week to week probably isn't realistic in terms of the reporting. Monthly, definitely. Depends, of course, on which part of our business. If it's a more transactional business, we can have quicker results. If it's a longer sales cycle, typically it's not going to be a week to week or sometimes even a month to month basis. What we do is we have a button in Salesforce.com where the salesperson would indicate whether this is a social selling influence deal. So did they use the insights, technique, and the approach to secure a prospect, to convert a prospect, and or to move an opportunity through the pipeline? So when it comes to measuring the impact of social selling, really in any types of social development or skills development, we have to look at it from a perspective of how do we identify if it's been influenced. So that's the way we have a self-reporting approach. I hope that makes sense. Whereas the salesperson will actually indicate whether they've utilized those. So once we run reports in Salesforce.com, we include, of course, whether it was a social selling influence deal, and there's our report.
And Tracy, what about excuse me, at Kofax? What do you guys do to measure the success?
We use Dynamics, but we essentially do the same thing that Reuters does. We track contacts that were sourced through social selling activities, as well as opportunities that were identified through social selling or progressed through social selling. So we track it in a system, in our CRM system.
Okay, yeah, I can tell you that for Dan, there's kind of a lot of ways to do it, but it seems to all come down to CRM. So you would track the source of the lead, where it was generated, whether it was from marketing or whether it was being called out. You know, if it was initiated by the sales rep, they have that ability to actually put that down in CRM. And also the influence. So you would record that in your CRM system the same way you would say, I picked up the phone and called them to try to engage them. You can say, well, I engaged them on LinkedIn through an email, and then I followed up with a telephone call. And your CRM system, after hundreds and hundreds of these, is able to determine, if you engage them on social, it actually has no effect on the conversion ratio on the phone, or it does have an effect. And I would argue with you that it's fuzzy. It's really not fuzzy at all if it's tracked appropriately. So that brings us, folks, to 3:19. We're at the end of our time. So there's a couple other questions, very, very general about social selling. So maybe send us an email. We're happy to answer those questions for you. I want to take the last minute just to thank Kevin and Tracy. Thanks for spending time to answer these questions and give us a little bit more insight on what it looks like at your organizations and some of the things that you went through having implemented these programs. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining us for the webinar. And once again, Kevin and Tracy, really appreciate it. Thanks very much. Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.